Okay, so can everybody hear me? If you've got any issues, please unmute yourself and shout out. Okay, so welcome to our session today. If is someone else able to take it, one of the team able to take over, letting people in? Yeah,
super. I will admit and mute as people come in.
Super, thanks, Becky. Okay, so thank you so much for coming to our session today. It's going to be quite an informal session, quite interactive. We'd like to hear from you as well. We're here to share what we've been doing this year and what we've learned, and to gather and get some feedback from you as well. So we're a small year-long partnership project which has followed on from the main Chalk, Cherries and Chairs landscape partnership scheme. Hopefully some of you, I'm sure many of you will have heard of that. And we had a small underspend left at the end of the project, and so we proposed to Lottery to run some this further year with young people, and it's been a really fantastic year. We've learned so much, and it's been a great sort of extension to Chalk, Cherries and Chairs. So we're a team of I've been the project manager for this year, and I've been working with a team of delivery partners that you can see on the slide. Hopefully you can all see the slide. So we've worked, the Chilterns National Landscape have hosted the project again, same with the main Chalk, Cherries and Chairs project, Amersham Museum, BBOWT, Chiltern Rangers and Wycombe Museum. And so we've got the team all here with us today, and then obviously they've been supported by myself and also Trish from arts consultancy Instar. So over the past year, 5 different delivery partners have worked on 5 totally different projects. And the idea was that they were all of the partners were really keen to try out different approaches with working with young people. So each partner has come from a different starting point in terms of who they've worked with and what their offer was. But everybody was very much feeling that they needed to do more in this area, and this project was a real sort of risk-free way of giving people some time and some space, which is obviously hard to come by for us all, to try out some new approaches. So we're going to tell you all about those today in some quick stories and some case studies, and we're going to have some questions and answers as well. So Becky's going to be keeping you all on mute, but as I say, if you do have a point where you need something, then please do unmute yourself and talk. But you can also use the chat function as well, so we'll be using that throughout the session. So if you familiarise yourself with where chat is, if you're not used to being on Teams all day every day, as I say, you can have cameras on or off as you wish, and we are recording the session. It'll be sent round afterwards. Okay, so we've got a really unique mix of people who've signed up to the session today. So it'd be really great to just hear from you who you are, so that we can understand who everybody is. So if you can put that into your chat, if you find the chat box and put that in there. So I'll just start off. So if you put your name and organisation, and then we've got a little question on the slide for you there as well. What comes to mind when you think of youth, nature and heritage? Give you a couple of minutes to do that. Fantastic. So most of you have put in your details, but do have a crack at the question if you feel like it's quite a big question. What comes to mind when you think of youth, nature and heritage? Okay, I'll just give you a minute or two more.
Do you want to read any of them out?
Yep, I will do in a second. So yeah, this project was born from, as I say, a range of partners wanting to do more with young people. So we felt we've kind of come back to this question quite a lot. So let's just have a look at some of your responses. So how do we breach the young people perception of heritage is, oh, it's jumped around. It's jumping to the bottom each time, hold on. Where's it gone? Yeah, how do we breach the perception from young people that heritage is dull or not for them? So what's great about this session and this project is the mixture between nature and heritage. So it's really great that that the attendees kind of reflect that. Let's see what else we have. So obviously feel free to read in the chat about who else is here. It's a huge question. How do we link them all together? Absolutely. Civic engagement, community and collaboration with charity and nature and wildlife organisations. So I guess that you're keen to do more of that linking up. Someone else says, I think young people getting out in the field, doing surveys, getting hands-on with their local nature and heritage and work experience is all important. What comes to mind is how important it is for both young people, for both youth and wildlife to connect them to each other. They can both help each other so much. Absolutely. How do we engage the next generation of custodians of the local countryside? Absolutely. So these are all, there's lots more responses that I won't go through, but do feel free to browse them, and we'll pick those out as well with the recording. But all really familiar questions that we've been grappling with this year, and that a lot of the partners have been exploring throughout their projects. So we're going to move on and we're going to hear now from each of the partners. Thank you for your responses to that. We're going to hear from the partners. So each of the delivery partners is going to have 5 minutes each to do a little spotlight on each of their projects. So you'll hear where they've come from, why they got involved, and what they have learnt. Okay. So, and again, please do put any questions in the chat if you have any as you go through. Okay, so first up, we're going to hear from Annette at the Chilterns National Landscape. I'm just going to spotlight her so that you can have her at the top of your list.
Good. Can I kick off, Anna? Fantastic. Good. Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for joining. Yeah, I'm Annette from the Chilterns National Landscape. And our project was different to our partners they were working directly with young people, and ours was much more of a strategic piece. So really exploring and defining our approach to working with young people. Although we're involved in a whole range of youth engagement activity, we haven't had a kind of defining strategy that's sort of led our work, and we felt this was really important for us, but also for our partners. So that's what that was our project, and our role has been, well, is extremely varied as a national landscape. At the very sort of top level, we produce the Chilterns National Landscape Management Plan for all Chilterns organisations to deliver, and that has a strong focus on young people. So ensuring that all young people in the Chilterns and surrounding towns have opportunities to experience and learn about the Chilterns informally and through formal education. So in terms of our role, we do all sorts of stuff. We deliver projects ourselves, especially linked to chalk streams, but we also enable and facilitate others. So really a lot of our work is delivered with partners, such as the Next Gen partnership. But we also commission and share research. We allocate grant funding. So, for example, for farm visits or for videos co-created by young people. And we provide a really important promotional platform through our website and comms programme. So all in all, it's quite a complex picture with lots of different players. And the challenge for us through this project was to identify the gaps and think, okay, so where is our best role? Okay, how we did it. First of all, we focused on the age 14 to 25, and with the Next Gen, the age group was kind of 14 to 18-ish, but we felt actually that the whole the next stages of traineeships and early careers are so important that we needed to look at that whole 14 to 25 age span. And we looked at three areas: youth volunteering and work experience, youth voice, and traineeships. And really, it was a case of pooling together some of the existing research, fantastic research that's out there in the Chilterns, but also nationally through the National Landscapes Association and the national parks, looking at best practice and sort of pulling out case studies that we could learn from and that could help inform our work. And there's some really good programs out there which we can highlight in the resource hub, the New Perspectives programs by the national parks. You know, some really successful case studies of how organisations are addressing the barriers that we'll hear about in, you know, engaging young people, but also changing the demographic of who's involved. And we spoke to partners and stakeholders, including those that we've asked, well, they're piloting activity for us, and we've provided funding, for example, for new content co-created by young people. So we're kind of building up some really useful resources. Okay, final slide. So what we've ended up with after kind of a few months of pulling together all this information is first of all a much clearer being able to articulate what our role is and our approach to youth engagement. And that's something that we'll be able to share soon. We'll have it sort of, you know, as a resource hub as well with links to some of the information. In terms of actual sort of deliverables that we can take forward in the next few months, a lot of it's been underpinned by things like the groundwork research, which shows that actually a lot of young people just simply they lack awareness of the opportunities. They don't know where to go to get information. So our plan is to create a dedicated section on our Chilterns National Landscape website on youth volunteering, work experience, youth voice and traineeships. And we feel that kind of coordinating role where we can just pull together information from here and there is so important, because the feedback we've had from young people and from their parents looking for opportunities for their kids is that you kind of have to really dig around to find that information. It's quite piecemeal, and I think we can do a really good job of pulling that together. Doesn't mean that we have all the opportunities ourselves. We don't offer that many ourselves as an organisation, but it's signposting and providing, you know, things like the videos that have been produced by young people themselves, so we can hear the benefits of getting involved through their own voices. So that's our kind of our big plan. Watch this space. We're hoping that we'll be able to go live by next March. And yeah, sharing learnings, new approaches, research, lots going on. There's also platforms like the Countryside Job Service has got some really good information, case studies on young people volunteering, traineeships. So it's that sort of thing where I think we can do a lot more sharing and learning from each other. And comms, I think, is a huge opportunity for us to kind of pull together and produce engaging comms, and particularly comms produced by young people themselves. So that whole kind of co-created piece. And yeah, some of that is being produced by partners at the moment. You'll hear a lot about strategic partnerships. And I think that's the kind of flavour of the day, really. And a lot of time and effort has to go into that. And I think that's where our focus is going to continue with Next Gen, making sure that we've got a really strong, solid legacy so things don't finish at the end of October. And then lots of other organisations, Youth Voice, Education Business Partnerships. There are so many. And I think the thing is we need to kind of be smart about not trying to do everything ourselves, but linking in with others who have that expertise and can help us deliver. So that was very speedy. How am I for time, Anna?
Yeah, that's slightly over. That's fine.
Okay.
I'm going to stop you there.
Shut up then. But thanks for listening, and hopefully we'll have a chance to discuss later. So that's
fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Annette. Okay, over to Becky from BBOWT.
Hello. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming today. I'm talking to you from the Berkshire, Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire Wildlife Trust, herefore known as BBOWT. So to give you some background and reasoning behind what we did, if we just skip to the next slide. Thank you. Our organisational vision is for more nature everywhere for everyone. And if we break this down a little bit and we think about how we get more nature everywhere within our 3 counties, we need more nature to be put in recovery. And to get more nature put in recovery, we need people to be taking action for nature. Within BBOWT, we run lots of programs for young people. We have a schools program, we have teen rangers, young rangers, we run lots of events, and these are really successful in their own way. But what we're really unsure about is whether people attending those events, does that translate into them going away and taking action for nature? And it's really hard to harness that information, but we don't think that there's that many of them really going away and taking lots of action. In addition, we do, like many organisations, have a kind of gap in that age range connecting with or engaging with us from the ages of like 14 to 25-ish. So we were using this project to try and fill those 2 gaps, to understand and work better with those groups. And we did this through a new strategy. So we used a community organising approach. And a community organising, it's a practice, it's a way of working. I've put a framework that we use up here on screen. It's quite big and complicated. I don't expect you to read it or understand it or anything like that. You may go away after this and Google community organising and learn a bit more about it. But essentially, this approach equips people with the capacity to build the power they need to get the change they seek. Essentially, people are way more likely to take action if it's serving a self-interest. If it's something that they want or need and they want to see that change, they're more likely to take action rather than doing something nice because they think it's the right thing to do or a good thing to do. And so within this community organising framework, the first 2 steps of it are reaching, so getting out there and reaching people and listening to them. And this is what we did in order to understand what young people in our area wanted and needed with regards to nature. So I held 14 listening exercises with 67 young people. And these young people are aged between 9 and 25. I'd say roughly half of them are between the ages of 9 and 15, and the other half are between the ages of 15 and 25. And yeah, I just listened. We held listening exercises with them in lots of different ways. And if we go to the next slide. Yes. Thank you. We're going to talk a lot about what we learned from these exercises later as well. But what surprised us with this whole project was this methodology that we used was difficult to explain and for people to understand, but it was itself very worthwhile. We learned loads from those conversations that we held with young people. And just to highlight just 3 of the themes that came out of those conversations, you can see on the word cloud, almost every single young person thought said that nature made them feel happy or calm or relaxed. And almost all of those young people were very aware that nature and wildlife was good for their mental health. The next picture is indicating that lots of young people, they felt a sense of pride in their area, and where they were really disappointed is when they saw rubbish or things that were derelict and dirty. And I believe this is because the perceptions that other people have on an area is important to those young people. And if an area is deemed very nice and clean, it will also be deemed as a safe area. And I think those young people want to feel safe. And another thing that came out was that lots of young people really want to see thrilling activities in their areas. So when I asked what they would like to see in their area, people were saying like theme parks and climbing frames. So yeah, getting this idea that they wanted thrilling activities. Another thing we really learned was that this listening is a real skill. It needs to be practiced and adaptable depending on the context of each of the listening exercises that I did. And if we move to the next slide, I've just got some key takeaways. So what I would pass on to others through this approach was that listening really is key, and it can be the first step you take in engaging with young people, not the third or the fourth or the fifth. When you ask what they liked about it or what they didn't like, it can be the first step. So you identify your target audience of young people, you go to them, and you listen to them, you involve them, and you co-create from the beginning. And throughout this entire process, reflect on what you're doing. Is the listening going well? Are you listening in the right way? Evaluate who you're listening to. And within this, and we're going to learn again later, that partnerships and connection can be really key in helping you do this reflection and evaluation. And that's me. Thank you.
Super, thanks so much. Yeah, it's been really interesting to kind of hear about the community organising approach and learn more about how to listen. I think that's benefited all of the partners and hopefully will benefit you all as well. So thanks, Becky, for that. Okay, now over to Bryony, who's the director of Amersham Museum. Just going to spotlight you.
Thanks, Anna, and afternoon, everybody.
Oh, I've just got a hand up from Danielle.
Yeah, sorry, just a quick question about the sort of listening activities you were doing. Were you doing that with schools in school time, or were you finding those young people in their own time, like in evenings or as part of like scouts and things like that?
Just to answer very quickly, I contacted mostly youth groups. A lot of this was done sort of near the end of school and in summertime. So yeah, individuals, groups, some colleges. I did it all. But we can ask, there is a Q&A function, and if you type your question there and then upvote popular questions in our Q&A section at the end, we will answer as many questions as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Bryony, over to you.
Thanks, Anna. Hello, everyone. Just to give you again an outline of what we've been up to at Amersham Museum. Amersham Museum's got quite a strong track record of working with a variety of young people. We have a young curators club for 14 to 18-year-olds. We offer work experience, individual placements. Quite a few of our volunteers fall into the up to 30 category, particularly our collections volunteers, and we work with lots of local groups. But as part of this project, we'd really identified that we had a gap in what we're offering for 18 to 25-year-olds. And what we really identified was that there were lots of people of this age group around Amersham, particularly because it's quite an affluent grammar school area, people who'd been to university or at university and had come home and weren't quite sure what their next steps were. So next slide, Anna. Our aim in the project that we were working with was to really look at this 18 to 25-ish-year-old cohort and people who probably hadn't come into contact with the museum before, and really provide them with a sense of place, a sense of belonging, a sense of something to do, that there were other people in the area who also were in the same situation, and do that through sessions that focused on both nature and on heritage. And we developed a scheme with a partner organisation, Wild Amersham, which is a local charity that works on biodiversity activities, to run sessions both on that wildlife and that heritage theme. So inviting expert speakers, hands-on practical workshops, historical and nature research, and absolutely turning to these young people to get them involved as heavily as they wanted to be in planning, in sharing with each other what we wanted to do and with other audiences, and actually and socialising so they didn't feel as isolated. And you can see that we ran quite a few sessions on different topics there in the word cloud there. Next slide. And as well as working with Wild Amersham, we also develop relationships with Amersham Town Council, but most importantly with St Mary's Church, which is the parish church right in the centre of Old Amersham. And we came up with the idea that the focus of our project would be the churchyard, would be the land surrounding, one before Anna, would be thank you, would be the land surrounding the church. It's got the River Misbourne running next to it. It's very, very tightly mowed, but that didn't need to be the case. And it's literally, geographically in the centre of the town, as well as being a really key part of the community. So we ran these sessions across the summer, one history and one nature, approximately each month, working with the partners, working with the expert speakers. We got 3 people to the first session, and now we've got about 11 who at some point have been engaged at least more than once. We've got one person who's come to all 17 sessions that we've run up to date, and they've done all sorts of really, really amazing things. So very slow build up, but now I feel we're really motoring on it. And next slide, please. What has surprised us really is that we didn't need to do very much. Once we got things going and we acted as the facilitators for things like expert speakers and the relationship with the church and the town council, then the young people have absolutely taken this and run with it. And you can see that in terms of feedback there in the speech bubble, someone said to us that the best thing about the project to date was chatting to people who are interested in similar things to me, and that they're not alone. Well, bingo, that's what we were really aiming for. My main advice for anyone who's interested in this kind of approach, and it links really nicely, I think, with the listening, is that once we got things up and running, we can step back, don't overmanage it, let the young people with all their skills, I mean, some of them run their own businesses, they've been through university, let them do their thing, and they feel a really, really major sense of ownership of it. And we're now facilitating and sort of watching them fly, hopefully. So that's been really rewarding all round. Thanks, Anna.
Fantastic. I remember when I came to a session, one of the really key things was one of the young people said, well, why is it called a project? Because that implies that it's going to end, and we don't want it to end. And so it's now not called a project, is it? It's a kind of more permanent thing. So fantastic.
Absolutely.
Super. Thank you so much. Okay, now we're going to hand over to Ros from Wycombe Museum.
Hello. Hello, I'm Ros. Can you go to the next slide? I can't even talk. This bodes well for this presentation. So, Wycombe Museum, or the Chair Museum, and everyone knows it. Lots of kids come here for school visits. But we had our reality was that while we'd done lots and lots of one-off work with different groups, we got limited sustained partnerships, and we got really good relationships with families, with primary school aged children, but far less for young people, defining young people as kind of secondary school aged upwards. And we also, because of all the one-off projects, I think because of us having a history of doing lots and lots of little projects, that had been quite a lot of pressure on our small staff team as well. So there was a bit of a challenge around buy-in from staff and nervousness around working with young people. So that's where we started with. And we wanted to do what it says in the green box, make young people feel ownership of the Wycombe Museum and understand it's a place for them. Wycombe, we're right in Wycombe town centre, and there aren't that many green spaces, and we're a dog-free green space. So we just want people to use our grounds, to feel comfortable here, to come and look at the museum. And so we wanted to build new relationships with youth providers, develop new models that we could keep going, that weren't going to tail off, and look at what our blockers were to working with young people. Can you go to the next slide, please, Anna? So our plan was to have, oh, you're going to need to press the button. Oh, I didn't think this through, did I? Can you press sideways? I've got it animated, which doesn't make any sense. So the first thing we did was work with work experience students. This is one of our delightful work experience students popping up from behind a shield. And we had 2-week-long sessions. Now, we've always done work experience, but it's been really incoherent, not a great experience for them, maybe. I mean, reasonable experience, but we just wanted to make it more meaningful. So we worked with them from the beginning, talking about what they would gain, what they wanted from their work experience, and actually working with them to build a work experience program, which we can now take forward to be our work experience program. So it was a collaborative effort to rebuild our work experience, I guess. Can you press the arrow again, please, Anna? We also we have young volunteers, but we haven't really worked with them in a concerted way. So again, we looked at our young volunteers. These are two of our young volunteers here. We let them do research work in, we asked them to do rather, research projects in a paired way, and we also got them to look at youth provision for the museum, looking at our website, and they're still with us. They're still developing stuff. They've done some amazing films. Both the work experience and the young volunteers did all of these films around our collections. It was really exciting. Next one, please, Anna. And the last one was working with youth group, one back, with youth groups. So this is some delightful young people all pointing at a picture. We had a challenge that the youth group that we actually ended up working with most, they were very young, they were aged 11 to 14. So we tried the more collaborative approach, developing the sessions together. Really didn't work. They needed more structure, and it was lovely. We had a great time, but it was interesting. And we're continuing to look at youth groups and how we can work with them. Next slide, please. Oh, no, I've done this one as well. So can you press all the buttons, please, Anna? So it shows I haven't done this for ages. So what did we achieve? We achieved structured work experience and youth volunteering, and we worked with the youth groups and got more clue how we could work with them in a meaningful, ongoing, sustained way rather than one-off projects. And we got staff buy-in. And I think the structure really helped us as well as it helping the young people. And just saying, right, we're going to do this, we'll see how it goes, and we can feed back and develop it, really worked. And I think my goal was to bring young people to the centre of the organisation and just say they're just part of who we should be serving. They shouldn't be this add-on. Can you press the button again, please, Anna? And so what did we learn? We learned that the young people did really enjoy having lots of freedom and being listened to develop what they wanted to do, but they also needed structure, and we needed to be there for them. So it was quite labour intensive at the beginning of each project, but then we could let them run, which was great. Love, they loved it. They absolutely adored it. Obviously, this was kind of young people who wanted to be there, but it was amazing. We gave them space and they really loved being involved. Resourcing, we are a small local museum with real challenges around staff time. We didn't have a learning officer for all of this project, so I was doing a lot of the engagement, as was some of my front of house staff. It was fine, but it was a major blocker for the project. But as I said, once we got the structures in place, it wasn't that hard. So it was great to have this little bit of funding just to push us to getting it going. And finally, negotiated relationship. It was really difficult to create the right environment for each group that we were working with. Each group had different needs, different kind of thoughts that they wanted to be involved. And so we needed to build our relationships. And sometimes that was really hard. So we kind of had to pick our battles a bit. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ros. Fantastic. Okay. And now over to Steph. So I need to find you on my list. At least R and S and near each other.
Excellent.
Okay, so over to Steph from Chiltern Rangers.
Thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. I'm Steph. So yes, I work for Chiltern Rangers, established for about 12 years in the High Wycombe area. And we use this opportunity to do lots of different things, about 10 different things, which are on the next slide. We use the opportunity to really strengthen existing partnerships with local youth providers, but also make new connections with new ones, and more importantly, start again talking to people, listening, and then trying new ways of working, or new to us. So the 10 things we did things like producing leaflets, we surveyed people, we did usual fun Chiltern Rangers style things with existing groups, like we had teenagers jumping in the river wearing waders, helping us with river cleans, having a look to see what lives in the river. But we also worked with a new group from Bucks College Group, and that was the Accelerate group. So that was a really important new partnership, which we're definitely continuing. So the Accelerate group are 16 to 18-year-olds for whom many of them English is an additional language, who have finished GCSE level education, but without the key English and maths, but have to remain in full-time education. So a real new group and a new audience for us, and quite a challenging audience, but we can talk about that later in the session. One of the real successes of this project was the campfire conversations evening that we had at Fungies Meadow Nature Reserve, where we invited adults who work with young people locally to discuss the motivations and barriers for young people and their engagement in nature. And that gave us some really good, rich information to work with and build on for the future. We did, one of my colleagues went and presented at the Bucks, Barks and Hart Science Leaders Conference. So that's 45 schools to try and, and that's primary level education, to really embed nature into the curriculum. And we do a lot of projects with primary schools already, with butterfly conservation as well. We also use the time to survey young people who already volunteer or have sessions with us, and also the adults, the parents and carers who look after young people who might come to Chiltern Rangers sessions. And from that information and feedback that we got, one of our volunteers really kindly sort of analysed that information and presented it back to me in a way that I could understand it. Some new ideas. So from that, we then had 2 sessions which came from young people themselves as suggestions of what they would want to do. That and also the original research that Trish at Instar undertook. So we had a nature photography session with a local professional photographer from Wycombe Arts Centre, and that attracted a brand new audience to us. So 10 young people came along to that, 9 of whom had never been to a Chiltern Rangers session. We also then developed or designed a session called Wild Tribe, which was less successful, but again, it was a range of activities that had come out from that youth survey. So they were the 10 things we did. Next slide, please. The biggest surprise, and this wasn't like a blanket response, but in so many cases, fear has become one of the biggest barriers for everybody connecting with the natural world, not just young people, actually the adults in particular. And it is preventing young people from connecting with nature, but it often comes from adults. So that's something that we can discuss later on as well. I think it is. It did surprise. I suppose it surprised us how deeply ingrained it has become. Was the surprise. And then the last slide, Anna. So the thing that we wanted to pass on to everyone here today really is to not give up. It's the resilience is key, and to make sure that we are still providing those opportunities for young people however we can. I said that we're established 12 years locally, building those relationships. So the long-term partnerships are crucial, and making sure that we don't give up, and that we still are motivated to try and engage with people. And yeah, the hard to reach groups are hard to reach for a reason, but we can do it. And that's it. That's us. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steph. Okay, so that was all of the 5 projects from the across the 5 partners, and as I've been project managing this, it's been really interesting, I have to say, for me as well, because having come out of the main Short Cherries and Shares landscape partnership scheme, which was all of these delivery partners were involved, and some more, and then a steering group as well, and the wider partnership, and we've grappled with some of these issues during the main scheme, and so it was fantastic to have some time to kind of unpick them a bit more. And in the latter stages of Short Cherries and Shares, we did some work with Trish from Instar on particular barriers, working with young people in the Wycombe area. But when we started the project, the 5 partners didn't really know what we were going to do, to be quite honest. And so I would say, give yourselves time. Obviously it's a bit kind of, for me as project manager, I'm like, oh, we need to know what we're doing. We need to know. We need to pin these down. But there were so many ideas and so many discussions, and that's going to come out a bit more when we talk about partnerships and working together in a second. But I think you have to allow that time for exploring all those ideas and all the different ways that you can work together and separately, in order to then come up with something that and I'm really pleased to say it's resulted, as you can hear, in some really fantastic projects that have all been really wide-reaching. And so we've had a bit of strategy, we've had a bit of listening, and then some kind of practical delivery as well. So it's been really varied. But it was a little bit of a kind of, oh, hold on tight and see what we're going to get sort of a thing. But it's worked out really well. So we're going to explore some key themes now in this next session, and we're going to be using the Q&A function within Teams, so hopefully you can see that in your menu. Depends on whether you're on what kind of machine you're on as to where it is, generally along the top I think, but sometimes on the bottom. So in there you can add any questions that come to you as you go through this, as we go through this session. And there's also a little kind of vote button as well that you can press if you like someone else's question. You can vote for that, which puts it kind of further up the list. So please do add anything in there. We've already got one in there, which is fantastic. And any specific questions for the partners as well that you've heard, of things that you've heard already. So like we've talked about, this project has been really great for allowing partners time and space to test out new approaches and working with new groups of young people. And we're going to explore some of the key themes that have come out, and it's actually been quite challenging. We had so many themes when we had a big delivery review session with the whole partnership, about 17 people. And we kind of struggled to get out the key themes because there were just absolutely loads and also really overlapping. So we've got it down to 5, which mapped out on our nice little graphic there. They will be in a minute anyway. And Chalk, Cherries and Chairs, I guess from the start it is a partnership in the very core, but quite an unconventional one perhaps, mixing nature and heritage. You know, that was it was a really key part of the whole partnership and has continued into this project. But what we've found over the 8 years, so the development stage of Chalk, Cherries and Chairs, and then the 5 years of delivery, and then this extra year, we feel like as a partnership we've really seen a cultural shift. So heritage working with nature organisations much more closely, you know, organisations that are literally side by side physically in the landscape in a wider sense, working much more closely together, creating unconventional partnerships, and allowing new perspectives and new activities which are delivering great results. So that's really fantastic to see. So our first key theme is, perhaps not surprisingly, partnership and working together, which I'm sure is great news for the National Lottery Heritage Fund because they are funding a partnership scheme, so that's great. This follow-on year has really allowed the partnership to strengthen. The partners have been able to start things that they've wanted to achieve for a long time, and they've all supported each other in doing so. So shared discussions have been a really key part of this. The delivery partners have met monthly, the steering group have met quarterly, and then we had a full day, as I say, to review the delivery as well, which was really fantastic day. So we've had time and we've had workshops, and you know, sometimes that can be really difficult because you think, well, I haven't got time to sit around and talk, and we don't want to be a talking shop and all that kind of stuff. But actually in this case it really has allowed us to develop the myriad of ideas that each partner had, but then also to reflect on the work that's been done and really give each other kind of peer support. So there's been a kind of change of mindset along the way, a different way of working. So you might think that, you know, the partners were working, kind of delivering something together, but it hasn't always been like that. It's about tapping into each other's expertise, or boosting each other's confidence in a lot of cases, and encouraging each other and filling resources. You know, I can't do this, but maybe you could help with that. And you know, everybody's stretched, everybody understands that, and I think that's been a really helpful to everybody. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily how we thought we would work together. We thought that the partners would do joint delivery, and it hasn't really worked out like that, but we've been open to the process, and it's turned out well. And the work hasn't all been about immediately tangible results, but building a case for work in the future, especially in the case of Chiltern's National Landscapes work. It's about what can we do for the whole landscape, rather than you know, long term, rather than just right now. And of course everybody has plans that, you know, that they want to carry on with. Young people, youth voice within the projects and the partnership, and how partners have learned to allow young people to take on areas themselves and kind of let go. You heard we heard from a couple of the partners about kind of just letting them run with it, which can sometimes be a bit uncomfortable, but really has fantastic results. Yeah, so it's just been a really fantastic example of how working together in a variety of ways can really help move things on. And there's an ongoing ambition, and it will happen, for partners to carry on working together. Specifically in the area, we've had a lot of conversations about working together on work experience. So you heard from Ros at Wycombe Museum about their new programme, and potentially working together. And it doesn't have to be just this group of partners, it can be much wider as well, to kind of provide perhaps a week of work experience for a young person or a group of young people. But it doesn't all have to be on Wycombe Museum's shoulders. They could do a day at Wycombe Museum, a day at Amersham Museum, a day with Chiltern Rangers, for example. So really interesting things to explore for the future there. I have a hand up. Rahid, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Thank you so much. Really great listening to everybody's thoughts. You as you were speaking, you said that the project didn't translate or didn't work out the way you thought it would. So the question is, with regards to the way in which CNL has supported partnership work and the methodology, is there something specific in terms of the methodology or methodologies? Because lots of partners have done things differently. Is there an understanding of what methodology or methodologies would be appropriate to use moving forward, given that the way in which the project ended up being run was different to the way in which you thought it was going to be run?
Oh, I think, well, I mean, there's probably lots of different answers to that, depending on who you are and where you sit, probably. But I would personally say to just keep an open mind, that you don't have to work together in a certain way. It doesn't have to look like a certain thing, but to try and let that evolve. And for people to, some organisations may have much more time for something at one point, and there's going to be ebbs and flows, and just kind of let it, see how it evolves, and bring people in, is what I would say. But as I say, everyone would answer that slightly differently. So do put it in the chat as well, and then we might be able to come back to it later, in the Q&A rather. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Trish now, who's from Arts Consultancy Instar, who's been a fantastic support throughout the project. She has been working with the individual partners. She's very experienced in working with young people, and has given them support and allowed them to develop ideas and kind of give new perspectives as well. So I'm going to hand over to Trish, and she's going to talk about our further 4 themes.
Thanks, Anna, and hello everyone. Yeah, I'm Trish. It's been an absolute pleasure to be working on this project and to connect with the partners and the young people that they've been engaging with. It's just really fascinating, and I think from my perspective, it's really great to have the comparative element to this project, the unique partners that wouldn't instinctively come together, which is a real legacy out of the Chalk Cherries Chairs project, actually. And actually, it's really interesting, exciting to see that dynamic occur. And then, as what's already been highlighted, when you bring perhaps those unconventional partners together, what learning can happen and what opportunities arise. And I think there's some really interesting detail here. So that's been really exciting. So it's great to be here. And I'm just going to talk you through very briefly of these sort of key themes, and then hand it over to the project partners to sort of share a bit more detail about them. So the first one is those barriers to engage in young people. But of course, we often think barriers as a default mode to be what are the barriers facing young people. And of course, that certainly has been delved into and really been a part of this project specifically, and we'll talk about that. But also it's barriers has also been mentioned professionally, as individuals, whether we feel we've got the capacity or the skill base even to engage and be a youth worker, or the fear of that. But also, of course, the barriers cross-sector, cross-organisational. And there's a whole host of stuff. And what's been really interesting about this project, those themes have come through, and there's a little bit of learning. So I'm going to just introduce you to Becky from BBOWT. It's going to kickstart some feedback, but also following her will be Steph from the Chiltern Rangers, and Ros from Wycombe Museum. So over to you, Becky, just to share a little bit about those barriers and what you learned.
Thank you. So yeah, a lot of the listening exercises I did, I was asking kind of questions on how young people felt towards nature, and maybe what things they didn't like about it, what they felt was stopping them accessing nature. So I have some themes that came out of that, and one of the biggest ones, and probably not very surprising to many of you, is this idea of a disconnect between young people and nature. And nature kept coming up as this other and separate thing, as something that was different from them, as something they would go into or visit. Phrases would be like, when I visit nature, when I go into nature. And I think that is something that fundamentally needs to change, and we need to embed nature into just a much more everyday thing. It's something that we are part of, and that's something that Steph had mentioned earlier about embedding nature into the curriculum. It needs to be embedded into what we do and who we are a lot more than this kind of separation. In a much more kind of specific way, there's lots of misconceptions young people have about nature, really specifically around flying insects and bugs. So I had lots of phrases like moths are possessed, all bugs sting you. And there is that fear about, a fear of the anticipation that they're going to get stung and hurt by these animals, which is, a misconception. That's incorrect. That is just another one of those barriers. And finally, not knowing what's out there. It's a different kind of barrier. It's something that Annette had mentioned earlier in her talk, which was that not knowing what's there, not being able to get the information, to attend events and be part of groups and all of that stuff. So yeah, I'm going to hand over to Steph, who also did lots of talking to young.
Yeah, thanks, Becky. I was going to sort of talk about the barriers for adults working with young people, and lots of ideas were shared at our campfire conversations evening, so much. But the thing that I kept going back to was, and we experience ourselves as leaders of sessions, as often the barrier is adults themselves, and whether that's a teacher or youth worker or anything, and it's too often too readily giving young people a way out or an excuse. So whether they themselves are saying, oh, it's too wet, we best, cancel the session, or it's too cold, or they don't want to get dirty. We've heard some ridiculous things like, oh, my kid's got brand new wellies, can you make sure they don't get dirty? It's too often, and I think it comes from what you were saying, Becky, that disconnect. It's not just young people who are disconnected, it is humanity itself. We don't make it easy for ourselves, but to change that, it's about education, isn't it? And it's partnering with people like Chiltern Rangers and BBOWT, and we're not frightened of taking young people outside into the nature, and doing more of that, is how we sort of solve that problem, I think. Lots of other things came up. People, that there is a fear of that it's unsafe. That letting people out into the woods or whatever is unsafe, and it's far more acceptable to allow them to go to somewhere that's sanitized and appears safe, like the shopping centre or into town where there's other adults around. But yeah, that was sort of the main thing that came up was that fear around everything. Over to Roz.
Hello, and I think I already touched on mine during my previous presentation, but our major barrier, it was, again, I guess, confidence, people feeling concerned that they weren't qualified, they didn't really know what to do, they didn't know how to talk to young people, as if young people are some kind of alien, really. And I think with resource constraints, with us not having that much time, it's really easy to say, oh, well, I'm a bit nervous and we don't really have time, so let's just get rid of young people from our agenda, and that's not productive. So I think, as you probably saw from our project, we actually did something quite simple. We went back to basics and we thought about what long-term ways we could engage young people at the organisation. And that let us work through those barriers in a simple way, rather than trying to put on something massive and creating even more stress. And by gently working through with these three different groups that we work with the young people, it made our staff feel a lot more comfortable, and it just gave space for that work to overcome that barrier.
That's brilliant. Thank you, folks. It's really interesting. I think what from my take on all of that as well is the format and the environment for these activities to take place, to discover more about, reducing those barriers, like that listening idea and that format, and talking with other professionals around the campfire in a wild space is a really interesting format. And then also just about the sort of like the barriers of staff, perhaps in a museum where there is a great sort of care taken with artifacts and various items within that heritage sector, and that fear of disrupting perhaps the norm even. So it's quite interesting to hear those approaches there. That leads on quite neatly really to the sort of engagement and reframing engagement, because as Ros was sort of saying there, really, when you're not per se, it's not your bread and butter to be a youth provider necessarily. You have to perhaps think differently about what engagement is, and what are those touch points for young people to access your project. It doesn't have to be that they are just the receivers or the participants of an offer. It could be that they're embedded a bit more, and as Ros did, for example, with the sort of engagement through volunteering and youth and work experience. That's one route through, but there's also online engagement and other formats, and that could be quite sort of, it could lever capacity if we start thinking differently about how young people can engage with our provision and our organisation. So I'm going to now introduce you again back to Ros, just to sort of further expand on that. You might be repeating stuff, Ros, and if you are, don't worry. But there's Ros and also Becky at the Wildlife Trust as well, just to sort of share their experiences of that sort of reframing of engagement.
Hello, yeah, it's me again. You're going to get bored of me. I think we were reframing how we were thinking of young people almost more than reframing engagement. It was because actually we already had young volunteers, but we weren't using them very well. So one of the things that we're looking at, as I'm sure a lot of particularly heritage organisations are doing, is how to increase our visitor numbers, which are going down, I think, across the board, and that's a real challenge. And our young people have made these hilarious videos, which we're going to use on our non-existent but soon to be existent TikTok channel. And obviously, by thinking about what they could bring rather than just being more people to sit on the front desk, it's just been brilliant. It's been lively and meaningful and exciting, and just means that we've worked with them in a different way. And it sounds really obvious, and it kind of is, but we hadn't given that space to how we work with young people before. So it's just really lovely and exciting. Becky.
Thanks. Yeah, we at BBOWT were totally changed how we engage with young people using this project and this new framework that we are using. And really, like I said in my presentation, it's having listening as that first step. So instead of running a program and trying to get feedback, trying to ask them during that what would they like to do, it's doing that right at the beginning. And when I said listening is a skill that needs to be adaptable, that's because every young person is different, and those young people will change as their experiences changes, and the contexts of the groups that you're going into need to be considered too. So thinking about listening as that really initial step, and having that as who is your target audience, and they could be different, because things like lots of us who engage with young people in nature, the young people who are between those ages of about 14 to 25 who do stick with it, who are really engaged, a lot of those people are neurodivergent, and nature or wildlife could be one of their special interests. It could be the place they feel they belong and feel safe. It could be that you have young people engaged because they are really career driven and they want to do volunteering, do Duke of Edinburgh, get work experience, get stuff on their CV. But those young people may not necessarily come from underserved backgrounds. So what I mean is that listening that I'm saying to do needs to be done continuously. It's not a one-off tick box exercise. It is a method of doing it if you want to have a really successful program or event and do all of that co-creation with them, and just reframing that way of engaging with them. You need to commit. It's not quick, it's not easy necessarily, but it is a long-term commitment. You need to build those relationships. But if it's something you want to do in your organization, this is something I really recommend doing.
That's great. What's really interesting about that, as well as having the sort of confidence as professionals perhaps engaging with young people, that we give that freedom of space for those conversations to occur. We often feel panicked that we need to be entertaining as much as we can, and actually it's really nice to sort of have those opportunities to listen and to bring that into our day-to-day, which is fab. Another sort of key theme that really has been quite prominent really is sort of visibility to young people. This came through a little bit with the work that I did initially, actually, for the larger scale project. And it's sort of really important to sort of review how we can connect to young people, but also how young people can connect to us. And I know Annette mentioned that initially in her presentation as well, and how the Chiltern's National Landscapes are looking at a hub perhaps in a space. So we'll discuss that in a moment. But I think it's really interesting to think about how hidden are we, and what are those routes of communication, and thinking about ways that we can share that visibility in different formats. Hearing Roz talk about those films and interpreting artifacts in different ways is quite interesting, and creating a TikTok channel. Wow, that's pretty on it. So we're going to just share a few ideas around that visibility. I'm going to introduce Bryony now from Amersham, followed by Steph and then Annette. So over to you, Bryony.
Thanks, Trish. This one is really not rocket science, but one of the things we all identified really early on is that young people can see a staged, badly taken photo. It's supposed to be representing themselves from an absolute mile off. And we were all using those kind of staged, not very well taken photos in our attempt to attract them. And we realized that that really wasn't going to work, and it wasn't good enough. So one of the things that this project paid for was a bank of professionally taken photos. We worked with a fantastic photographer, Neil Marshman, who also ran the photography workshop for Chiltern Rangers, to come along to some of our sessions to take really good photos of real people, real young people doing real things in real situations, so that we can then use those hopefully much more authentically to show what is on offer for the young people that we're hoping to attract. And just as an individual, as an organisation, Amersham Museum has already used some of those photos beyond that project, and we're just recruiting for young trustees. And to have that bank of really high quality, authentic photographs to draw on has been really excellent, and is going to be, I think, a really valuable legacy. As I say, not rocket science, but really important.
Great.
Over to Annette.
One of the challenges for us thinking about the hub is, is it for young people or is it for parents? And it needs to be for both. And that's the challenge, because obviously it's a big age spectrum from kind of 12 to 25 in terms of the young people, and then the parents. So I think one of the things is that we can include young people's voices in the videos, podcasts, and actually get them to help with thinking through the look and feel of the site as well. So that's one thing. The other, and with another thing, is the accessibility. So one of the videos is going to be looking at, which in fact Chiltern Rangers are producing for us, is looking at the work experience, the actual experience of having going out and volunteering and all of that through the lens of a young person. What did they like? What did they find difficult, in their own words and with their own footage? So it's very much co-created with and by them. I think that would be really powerful, but also promoting that through the kind of non-traditional channels. So we've been talking about TikTok. One of my colleagues, Martha and Fran, who've been working on a Not Born Yesterday project, I've done quite a bit of work with TikTok and had some really high engagement. So it's those sorts of things where we can learn, but we can also share that amongst the partners. Communications is so important, because we don't want it to just appeal to the kind of the usual suspects, that people are already engaged and will know where to look. They'll find the information. It might be hard to access because it's a bit all over the place. What we want is to reach groups and communities that are less engaged. I think that's where all those community partnerships that we've been developing will really pay off. It's so important. yeah, lots of thoughts there.
Over to you, Steph.
Thanks, Trish and Annette. Yeah, I think the example I was going to share with you was how we at Chiltern Rangers share our information, but also, so in our experience, it's still parents who are looking for the opportunities for their young person, as opposed to the young person looking themselves. So that's something that we'd like to change in the future. But the example really to share with you is that, so we had 2 sessions that we designed off the back of the feedback from young people, and that was the nature photography workshop, which was something entirely different to what we've usually done, and also this concept of this wild tribe session. So both, I suppose a bit of context for you, at Chiltern Rangers, there's 13 of us, 13 on the staff team, and within that we don't have a marketing department or budget or anything, so we put out the social media content, etc., and design our pretty posters on Canva ourselves. So both, designed in-house these posters, shared on our channels. Very much this is where partnership's important, because we, thank you to people who share our stuff. The photography session, as I said, attracted 10 young people. So 10 people signed up for that session, 9 of whom had never joined a Chiltern Rangers session before. And that was a great, it was a success. We delivered the session. It was great. New faces, a new way to engage. The Wild Tribe session was again designed from a lot of feedback. So it was at Fungies Meadow, which is a nature reserve that we can lock. So we were trying to create this safe environment that people were telling us, people don't feel safe. There was a range of activities to choose from. So it was almost like forest school for teenagers. So they could just come and chill out and hang out in a hammock. They could jump in the river and do that. They could do some sketching. There was lots of things that we'd sort of designed this day around. A poster for that went out. 1 person signed up for that. So and that was exactly, well, we felt, almost, and I'm not an analyst of algorithms at all, but we were doing the same thing, getting different results, whether it was the appeal of the session, the timing of it, who knows, but, we're limited in some ways as a team, but there was, just less take up for 1 session. So it was something for us to think about as well. Using our young people coming to our website, our young people coming, following us on our social media channels. Probably not. Their parents are, their grandparents are. So again, it's diversifying where we share our information is something we'll be looking to do.
Thanks, folks. Really interested again. I think this stuff, like, you have to test these things out, and it's all food for thought, isn't it, really? I mean, it's sort of like getting that reach out there. Diversifying the programme is interesting, and that you attracted, Steph, for example, a new cohort, which is probably very surprising, but it's really difficult to really know what works and what doesn't so much, but it's actually thinking about perhaps different ways of engagement and communication, not being so hidden is key. And also just taking in the opportunities to capture those images. One thing when you're facilitating, it's the last thing on your mind is to start getting the camera, and it changes your role. It's very difficult to sort of switch into that and start snapping away. And actually, if you do bring in a photographer and you get a bank of material there, it could pay off in terms of making that visibility relevant. And that leads on quite neatly, I think, to sort of the idea around agency and that co-development. Becky mentioned earlier about that listing and that co-development, which is really key to their programme, and it's really interesting to hear that. We've got some really lovely examples here now of that agency and that relevance. It's quite unnerving, I think, to give young people ownership sometimes without perhaps the skills, but when that flourishes and when that is enabled, there's some really interesting things that can happen. And one of the outcomes, as Bryony mentioned in her presentation, was very much about, if you just allow those friendships to form, then ideas start to happen and creative ambition occurs and all these things start sprouting from it. So it's really, really interesting to hear how we can perhaps bring that agency into the work that we're doing. So I'm now going to hand you over to Bryony to kickstart this about her Amersham experience, then followed by Roz and Steph.
Thanks, Trish. Yeah, well, if you remember, we're working with the older age group, the 18 to 25-year-olds. And as we've already said, they're either at uni or they've got a job or they're running their own business, they're freelancers, they're really capable. And so we'd hope that we could move quite quickly from teaching and some kind of formal sort of structure to something that they felt much more ownership on and leadership of. And it took a while and it wasn't a fast process, but we're certainly there now, I'd suggest. So, you know, having racked up a few sessions on topics we thought might be of interest, we're very much now led by them, predominantly with a WhatsApp group, you know, nothing more dynamic than that, to source sessions that they're interested in, and moved on from kind of spoon feeding. And now we have the young people creating Gantt charts. They created all the signage which has gone up with new wildflower circles in the churchyard. They're the ones who are looking for funding that will pay for plants. They're the ones who have researched which plants they want to put in this space first of all. They're the ones who have decided which audiences we're going to target to start off thinking about how we share some of the heritage stories around this. And the icing on the cake, I think, as Anna suggested a bit earlier, was that in a feedback session we ran at the end of the summer to work out what our next steps were, they said, why are we called a project? Can we be called a group? And please, can we have a web page so that other people can find us? And so that's what we were very easily able to facilitate. But to hear it from them obviously meant that we knew that we were moving in the right direction, and they now keep us to task. And long may that continue, I reckon. Over to Ros.
Hello. I think I already mentioned that we initially were giving far more agency to some of the young people than they really wanted. So going back to what Becky said, we did have to have a collaborative listening activity, and that was really crucial at the beginning parts of every bit of the project we did, which was to listen, to work together, and to look at where agency is meaningful. And I think one of the challenges we've sometimes had here is we kind of send people off with not enough guidance and not enough structure. So it's a balance between, because you can't do volunteering work and engage meaningful volunteering work if you don't know what on earth you're doing it for. And I'm not saying that we did that exactly, but you need to have a mutual conversation of understanding, I think, is really important. And let's face it, young people are also humans, so we can have those conversations and work out together where we're going. I think particularly with the younger age group, they needed a lot more structure. But with our young volunteers who are aged between 16 and 20, we're actually, well, I haven't quite wrangled it yet, but I'm hoping to give them a display case where they can display some of our collections which are never seen, which are off display, that they can do research with and put new labels in, and then have a rotating display. And that should be wonderful. I just need to have more discussion about how that's going to fit within one of our galleries, but we'll get there, and it's really exciting. Who's next? Steph?
It is me, thank you. Yeah, so we also have to, I think, be brave and realise that sometimes it doesn't work, and giving it's that meaningful agency, isn't it? So if you can, sometimes the young people just don't know what to ask for, or haven't had that exposure to our world that we have, so can't come up with the ideas. So what I mean by that is that you might say to a young person, well, what do you want to do out in nature? And they'll come back to us and say things like high ropes and axe throwing and you know, all great thrilling adventurous things, but that's not what Chiltern Rangers do. That's not what we can provide. We can signpost them to Woodrow High House or Go Ape and all of those things, but that's not what Chiltern Rangers do. So very rarely would we find a young person who would say, oh yes, I'd like to, you know, put some chest waders on and get into the river and perhaps kick about and see what's actually living in the gravelly bottom of a chalk stream. They don't know that. It's for us to provide that opportunity. So it's not that we're taking away that agency. It's going back to that, us, who are we and why are we here? It is to provide those opportunities for young people, which might spark that interest, which might do the things that we want everyone to do and change behaviour and all of those things. So I think it's, yeah, just being really aware that it doesn't always work because they don't know what they haven't experienced yet.
I think that's a really great point to end on there. I think that inclusivity of those who are less exposed to our world is really important to never forget, and to provide that sort of space and nurture for understanding and discovery, and to then that inform ideas and thoughts going forward. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand you now back to Anna, who's going to facilitate some Q&A. Is that right, Anna?
That's right, thank you. Just firstly, Rahid, I can see your hand, but in the interest of time, I'm really sorry, I'm not going to accept your hand up, I'm afraid. But if you do have a question, then do please put it in the Q&A and the chat, and then at least we've got it and we can answer it afterwards if appropriate. Okay, so yeah, we're going to have a bit of a Q&A now on these key themes. So thank you so much for putting some questions in the chat. I'm going to take the ones with the highest votes first and try and get a bit of a breadth as well. So a question from Danielle. How have any of the partners managed the safeguarding implications and the risks of unmanageable behaviour with unaccompanied teens? I'm keen to programme for more teenager-centric events, but our current museum policy is that children must attend alongside their parents or guardians, which means we miss a lot of teens who don't want to go out with their parents. Sob. Who would like to take this? Bryony?
Just to say that we run and have run for about 8 years a Young Curators programme, which is for 14 to 18-year-olds. It's run by me or one of my colleagues. We take up to 12 of that age group. They meet fortnightly in the museum. They help me with anything that needs doing, which could be projects, research, setting up trails, all sorts of things. And it's always been unaccompanied. We've never had it with parents. And in fact, some of the 17-year-olds drive themselves to the session and drive themselves home again. So although I haven't got a specific answer, you know, if you wanted to connect up, Danielle, and I can tell you more about that, I'm really happy to do that because we're not very far away from each other.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to arrange some time. That would be great.
Yeah, no problem.
Fantastic, thank you. A question from Rahid. Are the partners able to sustain these projects moving forward, given that some of you might not be doing this role as your regular day-to-day role? Any thoughts? I think it's some yes, some no, I reckon.
I think so, this is me, Ros. Sorry, I was meant to put my hand up. I mean, I think a lot of us, the advantage that this project gave us, it gave us space to think about what would fit, what would be sensible. So instead of having to deliver a specific project, which was kind of beginning, end, outcomes, we had space to be innovative, think about it, and that allowed us to build much more sustainable models to future working, I think, at least at Wycombe Museum. And I think for each partner, we had that space, so it made it more feasible.
Any other thoughts on that, Trish?
Just going back to Rahid, your original question actually about, you know, the sort of, you know, the model of partnerships and various things like that going forward. But I think one thing that really, as Anna sort of hinted at, really, is that this is really organic and you tailor it to the needs of your organisation. I think for one thing, the network and the partnership relationships are there. But what format that then takes is really down to individuals and the organisations themselves, because I think you have to really adapt to your sector and not be too contrived in a sort of format or a provision. And I think that came back through our conversations when we met. So yeah, it's open really as to where that goes, I think.
Do you want to come in there, Bryony, as well?
Only just to say that the other thing that we've been able to do through this project is look at capacity beyond our organisation and beyond this partnership. So working much more closely with Wild Amersham, who have experts and volunteers, and sharing that, which means I think ours is very much sustainable. Again, with the local church, who are working towards eco-church status, they're very keen to continue this project. So we haven't pushed ourselves capacity-wise beyond what I think we're able to deliver going on with it.
Fantastic. Steph?
Yeah, just to say, I guess, stating the obvious in terms of sustainability for us, we want to continue. It depends on future funding. We'll look for those funding opportunities and ways to collaborate. So working with the BBOWT College Group, we can continue through this project, and the access funding from the Chilterns National Landscape. So it's, yeah, our appetite at Chiltern Rangers is there to do it and continuing providing opportunities for young people. It's just whether the funding is there in the future.
Yeah. Trish?
I was on mute then, brilliant. Just to sort of add to that, the plans for the Chilterns National Landscape around the hub of connection will hopefully be a resource and a platform that doesn't require a significant contribution in terms of capacity, but allows each organisation to still connect visibly together as a sort of space. So I think that's a really great legacy of this partnership.
Yeah. Fantastic. And we've got a related question, leads on quite nicely, from Helen O'Hara, who I think is museum development potentially. I think, if I've got that right. What resourcing would most help the organisations to continue this valuable work in the future? For example, funding a freelance project manager, freeing up or backfilling existing staff time, digital resources, time of community partners funded. What would be your 3 wishes with a magic wand? Now's your chance, people. Go on, Ros. Hand was straight up there.
Well, I mean, obviously, always money. Money is really useful, and we're all small organisations who need it to be able to do meaningful engagement. I think one of the really remarkable things to pull back from this project is if you work in a small organisation, often you don't have that many people in the room, and to be able to bounce ideas off people from different sectors with different expertise creates a much stronger, much more interesting project. And so having the steering group, the delivery team that we actually met regularly, and we've even been to the pub together, is just incredibly valuable in developing our ideas and making them stronger and learning from each other. So I think cross-sector relaxed networking where you can make friends with people and work together, it shouldn't be underestimated as an incredible power for amazing projects and amazing work.
There's a lot of love in this partnership, isn't there? That was one of the main bits of feedback at the end of Cherries and Chairs, and we've managed to carry it on for another year, and we will continue to. Who's next, Bryony?
Just, well, to amplify what Ross says, really, I totally agree. It's capacity, but that very much in terms of time, not to have to rush, and also not to be very, very tied to specific deliverables. That's what's been very different about this project, as well as working between different unusual partners, or not typical partners that we necessarily keep within our heritage silo.
And Becky, quick thought.
Yeah, just again, sort of echoing on from what they've said, but this idea that our partnership did come from a funded project, but we've talked a lot within that about how we should continue that without the funding, because it is so useful. It is itself a resource, and the benefit from it is beyond the kind of what the fund allowed us to do. And a lot of the conversations we've been having is around this idea of embedding this work, so embedding partnership work, embedding youth engagement as something that you do, and trying to change that mindset that it is an additional thing. Obviously, a lot of the time there is capacity and money issues, but if you really want to do it, it's trying to embed that in what you do instead of seeing it as an additional add-on.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think we've got time for one more, but well, we haven't really, but just very quickly, just about from Fran Crowther, who's developing Not Born Yesterday, about listening to young people. So how do you do that? How do you listen adequately so that young people feel that their voices are being heard, but that you also manage their expectations? So, for example, your reference to theme parks, it's not realistic to deliver a theme park, for example. How do you manage the expectations versus listening? Probably
I can
Becky, isn't it?
jump
You've got your hand up before.
I'll jump in quickly. There is the structure that we are using is that community organising framework that I showed in my thing. The structure of the listening exercises themselves was different, and I didn't get into the detail of that. But again, if anyone is interested in how I did all of those, because I had to, I did change them from group to group, and that was a skill that I built up over the time. In terms of their expectations, obviously, not every town is going to have a theme park, but what I was doing, just to remind you, is to try and get these young people to take action for nature themselves. So the theme park thing would be like, okay, what are the next steps? And the young people would be doing it themselves. So in the end, there probably wouldn't be a theme park. But what I gathered from that, using the kind of skills that I was building up, was the theme that was coming out here was that thrilling activity, that they wanted a thrill. So that might not be a theme park, but it could be an outdoor, more thrilling activity, like sticking on waders and jumping in a river, or a go ape style thing, rather than itself like a big theme park, which is really hard. So managing their expectations, I would say getting them involved and doing it themselves, because, what is possible is something that they can have agency in, that they're part of. And so the disappointment won't come from you not delivering it, but then because they're part of the co-creation, whatever they get in the end, what is delivered in the end, has been made by them. So I feel like that's less disappointing then, because it's just they've done it themselves. I hope that makes sense. But again, hit me up, Fran. Yeah, we can chat more.
Sorry, Ros, we've got to leave it there. I can see your hand is there. But okay, we're very close to finishing. So, there was a nice slide about that. We didn't actually have time to do this panel discussion, but I felt that your questions that came from the audience were were really interesting. So just very quickly in the chat box to finish off, could you write in one sentence, what idea will you take back from this session? What will you take back into your work? Lots of people saying it's been interesting, so thank you for that. Different ways of measuring success when working with young people. Great. The importance of listening and co-creation, that it's an organic process. The idea of visibility, co-creation of programming by young people, for young people by young people. Cross-sector relaxed networking, breaking out of silos. Loads more. I'm not going to have time to read them all out. But this kind of serves as a little bit of a pledge for yourselves to hopefully go away and take action as a result of this. And hopefully we have all the work that's been done has kind of inspired you a bit, and will kind of help you with this work in the future. So it's time to wrap up. Thank you so much. We've really enjoyed sharing all of this with you, and we will go through the questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, and put those out on the email that we send out afterwards. We were going to have a final word from our delivery partners, but we haven't got time, but they've said a lot already, so that's fine. There's a few links on the screen there. Again, these slides will come out with the recording, so you can find out more about Cherries and Chairs and about this Next Generation project. And do sign up for the Chilterns National Landscape e-newsletter if you're not already on there, because that's how we communicate, and actually all of the partners' newsletters. And if anyone's got any questions or want to be put in touch with any of the partners, then please email me in the first instance and I will pass on details. But yeah, look out for the recording. Feel free to pass it on to other people that you think would be of interest, and the slides as well. And thank you all so much for coming. We've really enjoyed sharing it with all of you. Okay, thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.